Okay, Karen. Yes, HDR effect. Um, I want to talk about HDR effects a little bit, and I just want to kind of reinforce what I'm driving home in this discussion board is to be, staying relevant moving forward has to do with being able to look, learning how to find uh, resources for Photoshop, but it also entails being able to cultivate the ability to separate good stuff from kind of fluff. You know what I'm saying? And Piximperfect is really good, really, really good. So I was really pleased to see that you found a great source for this. You have to be careful, Karen. You have to be careful in some of the tutorials, especially if you're going to YouTube. You don't need any credentials just to post to YouTube. You don't even really need any training. So there's a lot of tutorials out there that are showing incorrect procedures, and also giving incorrect or less than great design advice. So that's part of staying relevant as a designer. I just want to add that in there. So HDR, let's talk about HDR. Okay, when HDR photography came out, it was really, really a very, very, very interesting technique that entailed some camera techniques that duplicated a process that was a very, very labor intensive back in the film days in the darkroom. And to be able to emulate this process using a digital camera was really, really effective at first. And I'm going back probably about 12 years or so. And then a couple of years after HDR was all the range, I'm sorry, all the rage in in Photoshop. I'm sorry, I should say, when after HDR was all the rage in image production. It was huge. Like I said, 10, 12 years ago, it was huge. Everybody wanted to do HDR, so much so that Photoshop introduced some techniques, and people started coming up with these techniques in Photoshop to kind of reproduce the HDR range in digitally, and it does a really good job. It does. I mean, as we can see, it does a very good job. The problem with HDR is as I'm gonna go ahead and say it. It was basically a passing trend. You don't see a whole lot of HDR presentation anymore. It's still out there. I mean, it's still pretty big, and a lot of people really, really use it extensively and quite effectively. It's just not as prevalent as we saw it even 6 years ago. So just be careful when you're going to use HDR. Just be careful the application is right. Be careful the setting is right, and have a good reason for doing HDR if you're going to. From a professional production technique, I don't find a whole lot of use for HDR. We used to do it a lot in real estate images, specifically, not so much so as houses, but in properties. So there's a lot of professional use for it. But as I said, just not so much anymore as back in the day. So it's again, I think it was a kind of a passing Photoshop trend, and you know what we know about trends, right? Just be very careful about how you use trends because they're trends. I mean, they're yeah. And I would never recommend that a designer design their logo, a trendy logo, because what happens? You got it. You just have to redesign it in a couple of years when the trend wears off. So anyways, this is a really, really good technique. It's a great tutorial, good source, good writing, good job describing everything. So fantastic post. Thank you very much, Karen.